A guy that you might have heard of called John Cage is often quoted saying that he knows now what harmony is because of deep listening and Pauline Oliveros, and that it's about the pleasure of making music. So please welcome Pauline Oliveros. I like demographic statistics, and I actually looked up that you're 9 years older than I will statistically ever be. Which year was it that you picked up the accordion?
I was 9 years old, so let's see, 9 plus 2 is...
I'll help you. It must have been 1941.
That's when it was, yes.
So if I imagine little Pauline back then, sitting in her room, playing the accordion, when you weren't playing, what was it that you were hearing?
What was it that I was hearing? I was hearing all of the insects and birds and animals that were sounding in the Houston, Texas environment, which was very dense. It was almost like a rainforest. So that was the sound, the overall sound that I was interested in. And I liked the cicadas very much, and all different kinds of things that I heard. So I was fascinated with listening as far back as I can remember. Oh.
Was there any other sound source around that was human-made, such as radio?
Oh, radio, of course. I used to enjoy my grandfather tuning his crystal radio. So I liked the sounds of tuning the radio rather much more than the program. And my father had a shortwave radio, which also I enjoyed the sounds of the shortwave tuning as well. So those were sounds that I liked.
Do you mind explaining what a crystal radio is, for those who don't know, including me?
Well, the radio, the device had crystals in it. I don't know that I understand or knew what the construction was. It's just that I knew that was called a crystal radio. Okay, I think you can find it on Google, pretty easy. Now.
When you left Texas and went to study in California, at that time, was it already established to teach music in universities? Or was that still quite a new thing?
Oh, no, music was taught, but it was more conservative. It was a conservative kind of music. There were no electronic music studios. And it was mostly centered on Western European music. Yeah.
What was the first time that you were actually laying your hands on a tape machine? Was that at San Francisco State College?
Well, the first recording machine that I had experience with, my mother bought, and it was a wire recorder. So you recorded on wire.
I don't know how that worked.
Well, it works with electromagnetism, and the information is stored on a wire, and it runs around like a magnetic tape does, but it's wire instead of tape. So magnetic tape. The next thing that happened for me was getting a tape recorder for the first time. Again, from my mother. She's very, very generous, and sent me a tape recorder. It was from Sears Roebuck, and it was one of the first consumer models, because tape machines were not available until after the Second World War, and veterans brought home tape machines from Germany. And in California, the Ampex tape machine Ampex was formed and produced tape machines. They were mostly disseminated to radio stations. So that's how that happened. As soon as I got my first tape recorder, I put the microphone in the window of my apartment and recorded. And what I noticed was that there were sounds on the tape that I had not heard. So that I tap myself on the shoulder now anytime I record, make sure I listen to everything. And I tell myself to listen to everything all the time. That's my trip.
So you went to California to study in San Francisco, and there are a few people that you met, and some of them you continued working with or communicating with for many, many years to come. Until now. So where did you first meet, for example, Terry Riley?
Terry and I were in the same class at San Francisco State College in 1953, I guess. And also Loren Rush, who probably is not as well known as Terry, but he's a very wonderful composer. So we met at San Francisco State College. Yes.
Who else was part of your group? Was Lamonte Young in your vicinity back then?
Yes, he was, but not until later. What happened is that Terry and Loren and I actually formed what maybe one of the very first free improvisation groups. And we did that because Terry had to write a film score, 5 minutes, and he didn't have time to write it. So we went into the studio at Radio KPFA where Loren Rush was a program assistant and had access to that Ampex tape machine, right? So we sat down, and Loren was playing koto and percussion, and Terry piano, and myself, I was playing French horn. And so we improvised several soundtracks, 5-minute soundtracks, without discussing what we were going to do. We just listened and played spontaneously. And then Terry took one of those tracks and used it for the film. But then we decided, after listening to our playback, that maybe this would be fun to do more. So we started meeting, several times and playing and recording. We discovered that if we tried to plan it, then it would fall flat. But if we just played and let the conversation develop spontaneously, we would always get something that was interesting.
Was that what got called Sonics? Was that the Sonics group?
No. Oh, no. What happened next was that Terry and Loren both went to Europe. They had gotten their MAs, I guess, MFAs at University of California, Berkeley. And that's where Lamont Young comes into the picture because he was in their class. And I visited that class once in a while and met Lamont and so on. And then Terry and Lamont got together to do some projects and so on. So that was how that happened. That Lamont began to be a part of the community that we were establishing in San Francisco. Yeah.
This community or this group started the San Francisco Tape Music Center, or at least a few of you did. It wasn't.
The San Francisco Tape Music Center came out of another liaison, which was with Ramon Sender Barrion. I met him through my teacher, my mentor, Robert Erickson. Robert Erickson was taught a semester at San Francisco State. That's when I first met him and first heard his music, and he heard mine. And so Loren Rush, whom I've already mentioned, was studying with him. And then I began to study with Robert as well, with Bob. And then Robert Erickson began to teach at the San Francisco San Francisco Conservatory. And he had a musicianship class that I attended, and that's where I met Ramon. And Ramon and I started to improvise together because Terry and Lauren were already gone to Europe. So that was the next step towards Sonics. Sonics was a series of concerts that were put on at the conservatory. And they always included a free improvisation to begin with. And then we would play our tape pieces that we made. And then Morton Subotnick joined us. And we began to have improvisations, including Mort. And from there, the idea was to form a studio, a center for experimental music, so to speak. And in the meanwhile, I was lucky enough to win a prize in the Netherlands from Gaudiamus for my chorus, sound patterns for mixed chorus. So I went to Europe for maybe 6 months or so. And when I came back, Martin and Ramon had gotten a nonprofit status for the San Francisco Tape Music Center. So then I joined in when I came back. And that's how the San Francisco Tape Music Center got formed.
Can we please see the first picture? Who is in there?
Okay, so you see Anthony Martin on this end, Bill McGinnis, Ramon, and Mort, and myself.
Looking very happy.
Oh, we were. We had a great time. It was really fun. If I had the option to go back in time, I think I'd go back there.
We're kind of going to go back in time and play an early piece, not sound patterns, but time perspectives from 1959.
Time Perspectives was the very first tape piece that I made. Yeah.
Should we listen to a bit of it and
Sure.
then speak about it? There are 16 more minutes to everyone who got curious.
Yeah. That is included on a box set of my, it's called Tape and Electronic Music from 1961 to 1970. So there's about 12 hours of tape and electronic music in that box set, including Time Perspectives as a, yeah.
What did you use for that piece?
What did I use? Okay. Well, these were our improvised sounds using found objects of various kinds and voice. And for filters, I used cardboard tubes. Put the microphone at the end of the tube, and so you hear voices modified by the acoustics of the tube. And I had different lengths of cardboard tubes to use. And then I think I used a wooden apple box to place small objects on and sound them either by striking or friction or activating like a metal strip to vibrate on the box and pick it up with the microphone. And I didn't do a lot of cutting and splicing of tape. I thought that was too labor intensive. So I would improvise very long sections of the piece and then put them together as a continuity. And this was a time where there were no mixers, so I had to use a patch bay to put sounds together. So I made a 4-channel version of this piece. So what we had was then 2 stereo tapes that had to be lined up and to play them together out of 4 speakers, which we did at the conservatory. Yeah.
How hands-on did you get in your work with tape?
Hands-on?
Yeah, did you push, pull it?
Oh yes, there was the fact that my home tape recorder. See, I didn't work at the conservatory. I worked at home, and I had the tape recorder, the second tape recorder that I acquired, which was a Silvertone tape recorder from Sears Roebuck, and so I had that, and it had the property of function that I could hand wind the tape and record at the same time, so I could get variable speed recording. It also had 2 speeds, 3 3/4 and 7.5. So I could record at 7.5 and drop it to 3 3/4, or the reverse, record at 3 3/4 and raise it to 7.5. So it gave me, those are the kinds of processes that were available to me that I just invented for myself.
Did you get involved in inventing and building instruments as well? I know that at one point you helped Morton Subotnick push a piano down the stairs so it would break and you could reassemble it. You don't remember, but he does.
I think he thinks that, but that was not me.
Oh.
That was a story that Mort invented, I must tell you.
Morton, if you're watching this.
Mort is very inventive. I mean, he has all kinds of... This is not the first time that I've heard a story about me coming from Morton Subotnick that is totally off the wall, not true.
It's beautiful to know, though, that our past is colorful in other people's minds, isn't it?
So, someday there'll be some writing about what I did. I don't know.
But did you get involved in building instruments? Did you start assembling your own machines of any sort?
Well, I would say that the instrument that I built is an interface that I designed. I had to have programmers to program it in Maxim SP, but at first it was totally analog. I got very interested in the distance between the record head on a tape machine and the playback head. That little distance meant that you had a delay. Okay, so if you monitored both of them at the same time, the recording head and the playback head, which you could do. You could monitor those both. And then you had the possibility of changing the amplitude of, say, the playback. And when you did that and you had the record head open, then you would begin to get a kind of reverberation. And that was very fascinating to hear, and so I worked with that. And eventually I started stringing tape from one machine to a second machine so that it would, the signal that I put in would pass 2 playback heads. You couldn't do 2 record heads or you would erase what you had already, and you didn't want to do that. So once I did that, then the possibility of routing the signal from say the second playback head back to the first or back to the second, you could create all kinds of interesting rhythmic configurations. And that's pretty evident in a piece of mine which is called Bye Bye Butterfly.
Should we listen to?
Okay. But to answer your question, I consider the expanded instrument system, which I now still use and used last night in my concert, an instrument. You know, it's an environment. It's an instrument that you can play, and it plays back with you.
We will get back to the
Yes.
eyes, to the expanded instrument system in a bit. This is Bye Bye Butterfly.
Thank you.
This is a piece that you made at the San Francisco Tape Music Center.
Absolutely,
and
yes.
You had become its director in 1961 after you returned from Europe. Is that right?
I had done what?
You had become the director of the...
No, I was not the director at that point. I was not the director until we moved the Tape Music Center to Mills College. Then I was the director in 1966 through 67.
Before you moved the Tape Music Center to Mills College, how did you finance it? What kind of space was it, and how did you get it?
What, the Tape Music Center?
Yes.
Okay. We had rented a space that had been that was on Divisadero Street in San Francisco, 321 Divisadero. That was our location. It had been I can't think of what it was before, but it had a small concert hall where we could seat about 150 people, and we built a subscription audience for tape music there. The studio was upstairs, a nice sized room. We had big equipment those days, not so miniature as it is today. No mixer, not yet. But we had a large telephone patch bay so that we could passively mix sounds. There were, let's see, I think we had two big machines. They had been donated from Ampex for the Tape Music Center, and various other items, but it was pretty basic. It was considered what you called a classical electronic music studio because it was built out of equipment that was never intended for making music. It was equipment that was for testing in laboratories and like that. So the sounds that you heard on Bye Bye Butterfly were made with tube oscillators. And the way that I made them, I invented my own way of making electronic music at the time, was to set the oscillators above the range of hearing, say around 40,000 hertz. And then there would be differences between the 2 or 3 oscillators that I would use. If you know what an oscillator, a tube oscillator looks like, it has a big dial in the center of the face, and it has the possibility of setting ranges, so you can go above the range of hearing or in a certain range that is in hearing and below the range of hearing. So the only way you could change the pitch of the sound was to turn this dial, and so that was not necessarily a good way to make some music. So by setting these oscillators at above the range of hearing, and I learned this from my accordion teacher. He taught me to listen to difference tones. So difference tones are the difference between 2 or more frequencies, because they produce the difference between them below and also above. At 40,000 in that range, you hear the low difference tones. So when the difference tones, when I first heard the difference tone sounding, and it corroborated my way, then I added the tape delay system that was used in Bye Bye Butterfly. But the way I was playing the oscillators was by just barely turning the dials. So I had reduced that aspect of oscillator playing to being able to sense where you want it to be in an improvisational way, and by listening to what was coming out. So I was listening intently and performing to get the sounds that I got. Okay, I was very interested in layering sounds and in taking the same tone and then microscopically varying so that you got different sidebands, they were called. So this was a simple setup, actually, but it could produce very complex results.
There's another piece that you worked with different tones on. That is 1 of 4.
Yes.
So let's.
Well, that was at the University of Toronto. Here no, this is Montreal. Sorry, I was in Toronto last week. But I went to. There was a summer program where a number of composers came to learn about electronic music. University of Toronto had one of the best classical electronic music studios at the time. So that was the summer of 1966. And at the Tape Music Center was a really ragtag studio. I mean, we just put things together the best as possible. But at UTIM's, there were 12 Lafayette oscillators, tube oscillators, and they were all connected, each one connected to a key on a keyboard, which was not necessarily my interest, but I was able to say put a weight on a key so that I could keep the tone sounded, while I could play the oscillators the way I did in Bye Bye Butterfly for this 1 of 4. And it was also a 4-channel piece, but it was done with those at that studio. And I had gone there because I wanted to learn more about electronic music. And I also studied with Hugh LeCain. And Hugh LeCain, of course, was a wonderful engineer who made some of the first electronic instruments to play. So that was a very good summer. Okay, so this piece came out of that.
Let's listen to a bit of it. This is 1 of 4.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
You just mentioned Hugh LeCain, who you worked with in Toronto, who
Yeah.
was an instrument developer. But there's another instrument developer who came by at the San Francisco Tape Music Center to work with Martin Subotnick, and that is
Yes.
Don Buchler.
Right.
Were you interested in his work at that point? Were you interested in synthesizers?
No. I wasn't. I mean, I certainly have great respect for Don, and Don just passed away very recently. Mort and Ramon advised him because what had happened is they had tried to be in connection with different engineers to see if they could get a modular synthesizer according to the specifications that they were interested in. So that's how that worked. There was their collaboration with Don, and he produced the Buchla modular synthesizer. And so when Don was demonstrating that, I was upstairs making Bye Bye Butterfly. And the thing is that I didn't like the sound of transistors, not after working so intently with tubes, with tube oscillators. The sound of tube oscillators is different than sound of transistor oscillators. And so the frequency response of the Buchla synthesizer was, I mean, I couldn't set oscillators up to 40,000, for example, because I think the cutoff was maybe 20 or maybe 30. I don't remember now exactly, but it wasn't. It didn't have the range at the time of what those oscillators that I had been working with had. So I had a little hard time to transition from working with that classical electronic music studio to the new modular synthesizer. But I certainly did have to do that, and did when the San Francisco Tape Music Center was moved to Mills College. Mort Subotniks had been teaching there at Mills, and Steve Reich, by the way, had done his master's there at the same time. Yeah.
Steve Reich was involved in maybe the most famous piece that got ever made at San Francisco Tape Music Center. It was the premiere of In C. He was playing the piano, right?
He was playing, but that was Terry Riley's piece.
Of course, but
yeah.
Steve Reich was playing.
Yes, he was playing. He was playing, yeah.
And another very, kind of popular piece at that time was
right.
Martin Subotniks.
I mean, NC is still very much played in many places, yes.
But Martin Subotniks' Silver Apples of the Moon was a very popular piece at the time, also in sort of like broader pop culture, right?
Right, yes.
Did that lead to, pop musicians or rock musicians at that time coming to San Francisco Tape Music Center and wanting to collaborate with you?
They came not to collaborate with us, but to learn about electronic music. And Anthony Martin, who was pictured in our visual artist, began to do rock shows at the Fillmore Auditorium in San Francisco, and later in New York at the Fillmore, with the rock bands. So all the light shows that you see today had their seed from the San Francisco Tape Music Center.
You, though, had studied in, a classical music environment. How did those people react to what you were doing in the San Francisco Tape Music Center, you and your group?
Well, they weren't exactly interested. Some people were, and so gradually, things changed. And with the move of the Tape Music Center to Mills, one of the things that was important to me in the contract, this was with the Rockefeller Foundation, who they wanted us to have a responsible fiscal agent, and that was Mills, not us crazy artists.
Were you a crazy artist?
I still am.
That's true.
Maybe crazier, who knows?
When you picked the name San Francisco Tape Music Center, was there ever a debate about it being called music? Did you debate the term music?
Of course, that isn't music. And so I made a piece while I was in Toronto at the UTEM's called "But Is It Music?" And it was like a Gertrude Stein piece, where the phrase "But is it music?" was looped and played against itself and so on until finally it just disintegrated.
I don't have this piece, but I want to listen to a later piece that actually an extract of a performance of yours, the tuning meditation at the Kitchen in New York.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Uh-huh. Thank you. Thanks.
What I find specifically interesting with this piece is that you likened the human body to a computer system in other of your texts and interviews, saying that if you give humans code, they can solve problems. Mm-hmm. And in this case, you gave them code.
Right.
And the desired result is them making sounds.
A piece, yes. Uh-huh. Yeah, it's an algorithm, actually.
you're giving people algorithms to
Yes,
become instruments.
That's right. That's building instruments.
Can music be made without humans then? Or in your understanding, an instrument always includes a human?
Yes, for me it does, because humans are very inventive and creative, and so then things happen that you wouldn't have been able to write. Yeah.
So you've mentioned the term expanded instrument system earlier.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just humans, as in the piece that we just heard, does that already count as expanded instrument system, or does there have to be technology?
Well, expanded instrument system is about delay times. I mean, so it does require requires equipment. Yes, and in the early days of the expanded instrument system, it was me lugging around a couple of tape recorders. It was a heavy duty experience to set that up and do it, because I had done it in a studio, but now I had to carry tape machines. I think I had what I had were a couple of Sony 777 recorders, which were not exactly lightweight, that I would carry around, but they weren't as heavy as an Ampex machine, a big studio machine. It was very interesting. I mean, you needed a truckload or a trainload of equipment to do things in the very first instance of trying to make electronic music. So through the years, it's come down to the fact that you can do things on your phone now, but not then. See, and I must remind you that there were no mixers in this early, San Francisco Tape Music Center, and no mixers at Mills either for a while. So things had to be done in a variety of ways that you would figure out.
Saying that you didn't have mixers in the San Francisco Tape Music Center, and now people can do things on their phones. Mm-hmm. Does it surprise you how fast things went, or is this exactly how you imagined the future in 1961 or 1950?
Imagine what would happen. No, not like that. It was not that predictive.
You've said that the ICE, the expanded instrument system, has to incorporate. It is always about delays.
Yes.
So what is it specifically about delays that fascinates you?
Well, all right. So I'm an accordion player. If I play a sound, I have very little possibility to bend it. So if I played a sound and then had a delay sound return, I could bend it with a foot pedal, so that I would send. I would have voltage control over the delayed sound I got to be quite a peddler, so that I could control the pitches with my feet that were coming back. And so that's why delays were important, because I couldn't bend the original sound, okay? But I could certainly bend the second sounds, or third or fourth, whatever, okay?
Reverb played a very important role too, though, in your work, especially when I think about one day in my hometown in Cologne in the late 80s, in a very deep cistern that you played.
That's right. Yes. Yes. Right. That was a 45-second reverb delay in the underground cathedral that was the water supply for Cologne. Yes, and there was a whole project. I forget the name of the person that instigated that. So I was in Cologne to do something else, and I was invited to the cistern. And this was also very close to the time that Stuart, Dempster, and Panaiotis and I went to the cistern in Fort Worden in Washington State, and climbed down 14-foot ladder into the cistern, which had 89 pillars and was made of reinforced concrete, and had a 45-second reverb time. So that's where we made the CD that's called Deep Listening.
So we're going to listen to a bit Pauline Oliveros, Stuart, Dempster, and Panaiotis with Lear.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Okay.
This release, I think 1989 album.
Yes, it was released in 1989 by New Albion Records, and we made the recording, went to the cistern in 1988. Yeah.
And it's called Deep Listening, and is namesake for
the practice.
For the practice that you developed now over many years, actually together with your partner who's sitting over here.
Ione, yes.
Ione. Maybe you'd like to introduce this practice to us.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to say that because we had decided that we had a release, we had to name the album, and so I came up with Deep Listening. And then we laughed a lot and rolled on the floor because we had been 14 feet underground.
Deep.
So Deep Listening comes from a pun, okay? So punning can be good, You can believe the stuff.
I agree.
So what happened then was that I started naming different programs that we were doing Deep Listening. So we had the first Deep Listening retreat was in 1991. It was in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in New Mexico at a small retreat center where we were the only thing that was happening besides a generator for electricity. And then so we had electricity from generation and water from rainwater up there. It was a very peaceful and wonderful place to start this practice. And I said, it was going to be a deep listening retreat, but I didn't know what that was. So in the next, I would say 8 years, I learned how to lead or facilitate. I rather like facilitation rather than leadership, because that's too hierarchical. But facilitation then is more collaborative with people. And then Ione, who is sitting right here and has practiced listening in dreams as part of deep listening, and facilitates what she calls dream community, because when people start dreaming together, they often have experiences in their dreams which are relational, and so it creates a kind of interesting community. And it's not about analyzing dreams. It's about the creativity that comes from what happens in dreams. So that's part of our deep listening practice, what she does. And then the other part is from Eloise Gold. Eloise is a movement practitioner and does Tai Chi and creative movement. So that's part also of listening through the body, which is very, very important to this practice. And I just recently had an experience which I want to tell you about because it illuminates deep listening very, very well. I for a whole year now have been working with Tarek Atui, who is an improviser and composer and has commissioned instruments to be built for the hard of hearing and deaf. So in my teaching at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, Tarek was in residence as an artist at the Experimental Media and Performing Arts Center. And he needed to interact with some students, so I had my seminar called New Instrumentation for Performance. And the students, there were 8 of them, were working on a project to build our instrument or interface for the hard of hearing and deaf, which is a very interesting project. How do you do that? So that took a bit of thought and experimenting and so on. At the end of the semester, we had a concert with the students' projects, and then another concert with in May with instruments that Tarek had commissioned. Then the next time to be working together was in Bergen, Norway, this past August. And this was the first time that I got to work with this project with actually deaf people. There were 3. And on the first day of my residency there, I interviewed Robert Demeter. He's on Facebook as Demeter Robert, because there's other Robert Demeters. But anyways, Robert was very, very beautiful and interesting and vibrant. We communicated through a translator. About halfway through, I decided the first thing that the decision I would make was to ask Robert to conduct my piece, which was called Sensational Sounds for hearing and non-hearing performers. And when I arrived in Bergen, that's all I had was the title. But so that decision to ask Robert to conduct the piece was the first kind of compositional decision, right? And then there were 2 more women who were deaf, and we also talked. And then we had the musicians that we were going to use for the piece were from the Norwegian Philharmonic. And so there were a dozen of those musicians, and I asked the 3 deaf performers to teach the musicians how to perceive their instruments or play them. Because I told the musicians they had to leave their own instruments at home. That was another compositional decision. No, and so the instruments that were performed were all instruments that Tarek had commissioned, and so it was so beautiful to see them engaging right away, the non-hearing and hearing performers, because of the relationship turned around, so that the deaf had something to teach to the hearing. And then by the end of the evening, there was a 2-hour time. The musicians were improvising with the instruments and sounding pretty good. Next day, I gave them the first section of the piece, and Ione had contributed to this by taking them through dream processes, so that their creative aspect of their dreams was presiding in there. And so the first section of the piece was called Eagle's Nest, which was a dream name that one of the performers had. Other performers had all kinds of interesting dream names, but this fit the section, and it was Eagle's Nest Ins and Outs. So Robert's task as conductor was to bring people in and take them out. Well, that was a simplistic thing. What happened was that they started to do this improvisation, and it was quite obvious that Robert, with no any kind of amplification device at all, was perceiving the music. Okay, so it was clear. He conducted and gave the musicians expressiveness. And the expressiveness came from his understanding of gesture and feeling and sensing at some level, which is probably the whole body, the music. So this was extraordinarily important to me. And by the way, Robert conducted the whole piece, which was about 45 minutes, to an audience of that was sold out, 600 people. The venue was the former Central Badet, which was the municipal swimming pool. So most of the instruments were set up in the deep end of the pool, which was appropriate, right? Without water, right? You could imagine the water if you wanted to. Okay.
This is a good moment to open it up to questions to Pauline or to each other if you actually want to talk about this experience and about how radical quietness can be.
And if you have a question for me, be sure that you're on a microphone from somewhere. Yeah. Otherwise, I won't be able to hear you because I'm hard of hearing, but not hard of listening.
As long as the microphones are going around.
Good.
Yeah, here's one.
Emily, how are you? I just want to thank you for the inspiring performance last night, the lecture and the meditation. And it's a question session now, right?
Whatever you like to say or to ask. You can sing if
Comment
you like to.
or dance, whatever.
I have a lot of questions, but I just throw one first that's related to the meditation session. I realize you use a lot of the power of the silence in your music and also the way you form the concept. Like last night, I realized the rhythm actually lies in the silence between the pads you're playing. And I found that very interesting. And I also realized that you use a lot of unintentional sound, if that's how you should be addressed, like the sound that was not made on purpose, to emphasize the sound that's made on purpose. So I want to ask you how you perceive the role of silence in your creative pattern.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd like to know your thoughts about it.
Well, I do practice what I call deep listening all the time. And I'm always listening for what is around me as well as what is in my mind. In performing, I generate the first sound that happens, and I'm listening to that. And in order, I have to listen. Maybe I need listen exclusively, or maybe I'm listening to everything. If I hear something, then I incorporate it into what I'm performing. So then, for example, there was a interesting time in Vancouver, Canada, of playing in a really beautiful wooden structure. And I was playing solo accordion, not the V accordion, but my other accordion, the one that's been through my life. And somewhere in probably 40 minutes into my performance, fire engines went by. So after the performance, there were not one, but there were 3 people came up to me and said, "How did you get the fire engines to go by on time?" So the only answer I have is that I was listening, and I heard them, so they became part of the piece. That's called Pauline's orchestration.
Have another question? Yes. Yeah. I have another question. So besides using the silence, and you have developed from analog to using technology, like you were talking about Mac MSP, and last night you were using this MIDI and laptop and all that together with the instrument. So I want to know, how do you take the role of technology while you're making music, and do you prefer one over another, or how do you perceive that? Because you said you have somebody programmed for yourself, so do you think yourself is still like the concept is still analog, but you'd like to use technology to help you to make it the way you want, or how do you perceive that? Yeah.
So you're referring, I mean, you're using the word technology to mean computer, right?
Yeah, like the development.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's fine. I'm an analog native. You heard a while back. It was about 1991 that we started transitioning the expanded instrument system to max MSP, so that what had been analog before became computerized. And so, I mean, the ICE system now is almost completely on max MSP. A program. However, there is always the analog end of that, which is getting the signal out to speakers, and speakers are analog. So what would replace speakers in the future, I am not sure. How would you materialize sound with just a computer? That'd be a pretty interesting project for somebody, or somebody's to try to do. And while they're at it, it would be nice if they could materialize the person from one place to another so that you didn't have to fly on a plane. Okay. So, all right. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I had, hello, how you
Hi.
doing? Thanks so much for everything. I had a follow-up question to that, which is that the hybridization of the extended instrument system sounds really fascinating. I'd like to maybe know a little more about the detail of how you improvise with it. Not strictly on the max MSP programming, but more how you're interacting with it.
Yes. Well, of course, I've done the data design all the way. So the programmers help to make that possible. And of course, I'm always asking for more and more impossible things, so that it keeps developing. I mean, there's been an evolution of this system since 1966, I would say. Now, you asked me, what did you ask me?
Specifically, I was wondering when you're performing how you interact with the system. I'm not totally clear how it works, so to speak.
Okay. Well, I'm not totally clear either, but I don't necessarily want to be. I'm what I'm interested in is listening to what's coming back and interacting with it, performing with it, just as I have told you how I do. So the expanded instrument system has algorithmic changes, so that it may. So if I play a sound, I don't know what's going to happen to it, because it may come back modified, changed in pitch, changed in modulation of some kind that act on the sound to bend it in various ways or whatever, and then I'm playing with it. So what expanded means, not extended but expanded, is I play in the present, but I'm listening for the sound to come back in the future. But when it's back, it's in the past. So the expansion is of time. So I consider it a time machine. Yeah? But every sound that comes out of the speakers is sound that I made at some point in the performance. But that sound then has been processed algorithmically in the system, in the expanded instrument system. Okay.
And that's a beautiful, clear explanation, by the way. Thank you.
Okay.
Is it something? Is that something that is open source that you're sharing with a wider community, or is it exclusively something that you use yourself?
It's max MSP right now. It's not open source code, but max MSP. If you know Max and want to work with it within the program, then you would have to work with it in Max right now. Yeah, that's possible though.
Perfect. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question to that too, in regards to what he just said. With the hybridization of the system and you, do you consider technology to be part of yourself in a way that you consider yourself maybe a kind of cyborg when you make music?
A cyborg, huh? Okay, yes, of course I'm a cyborg. Not only that, I mean, I have replacement lenses in my eyes, for example. I have a couple of teeth that are, you know, I mean, I'm on the way.
That's what I'm saying. So when you're playing, I mean, the technology is part of you, right?
Yes, it is. I mean, it feels. I feel that. I feel intimately connected with what is happening. Yes.
And you mentioned the Facebook presence of someone you worked with earlier, and your deep listening is happening on social media a lot, which I find kind of surprising, because to me it would feel contradictory to have deep listening practice spread through a very noisy environment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just listen to it.
Listen to the World Wide Web.
Listen to the noise. Listen to the noises. Yeah. Somebody else? Okay. Hi.
Hello. Thank you so much for this lecture. My question is, I guess you're aware of this thing called the Schumann's resonance.
Yes.
And to me, my idea is like from that tone, that's the tone which is proportional to the earth. So like that bass tone that the earth produces some kind of musical thinking. So if from that we build the world of vibrations in which music exists.
Exactly.
And in relation to the proportion of the earth and the human body, do you think there may be some frequencies which are more suitable for this geometric proportion? And because we are surrounded by frequencies all the time, some are very low, we don't get, and some are very high, we don't get, like telecommunication and stuff. And also in the meditation, because you can start like oscillating in a meditation, and it goes higher, 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 higher. So do you think like there's a suitable range of frequencies for the human body to, I don't know, get some kind of special information of music?
Well, I think you would be very, you could learn quite a bit by hanging out with the deaf community, you know, because they don't have hearing through ears. I mean, their hearing is really through the whole body, you know. And that was so obvious to me and interesting in having Robert conduct my piece, because I mean his conducting gestures were very appropriate, and he instigated different rhythmic patterns as well, and so he was perceiving what was going on, but he was also cueing people in a musical way. So there is this deep listening in the deaf community, which is informing me. But I've always liked being around the deaf community, even though I haven't learned sign. You know, I still feel something very, very important going on in terms of expressivity and presence. You know. In their interchanges with one another, so I think that's where you could find some really interesting information.
Very good advice.
You're welcome. Okay.
Thank you.
My question is kind of answered.
Who are we hearing?
Well, okay, I will ask anyway. Okay, so first of all, Hannah just mentioned something about a Facebook or something. So is there an instructionary, or not instructional because that wouldn't really fit, but like facilitator or whatever of deep listening techniques or something where one could follow up on the ideas of what was it again? The dream community and all these things that you were talking about.
Yeah. Well, yes, for sure. For example, Kathy Kennedy lives here in Montreal. Is Kathy here? She said she was going to come. Online, yes. Anyway, Kathy Kennedy has what we call a deep listening certificate, which entitles her to teach deep listening workshop. So she's a person that you could be in communication with. You can find her online. Kathy Kennedy, yeah.
And there are
And then,
videos
okay.
on YouTube that you can watch with
Yes.
Pauline teaching. So if you go to deeplistening.org, I believe it is, then
Yeah,
you can see more.
right.
I think there was more questions from Matthias.
Yeah, no, but if she wants...
Let Ione speak first.
To add to that we have deep listening programs teaching that are happening online, and that they're happening through the Center for Deep Listening at Rensselaer, so that people can actually study to have certificates in deep listening.
Yeah.
And that's a totally online program. It's
Right.
very, very special and innovative. It's wonderful.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you very much for that information. I will add another question which goes a little bit back to what Pandai Jing asked over there, but maybe formulated in another way. So, listening to your very insightful lecture, it was a lot about the fascination, for instance, for the radio sounds of the shortwave, which I can very much understand, like this, and real reverbs, like a very physical approach also to things. I would say like the physicality in some way, the imprint on a tape, which is something that I find that is, well, analog, mechanical, physical in a way. So what I was wondering, as opposed to this very physical approach of creating and exploring sound, we nowadays are somehow facilitated by, obviously, the digital technique that simulates all of this, simulated delays, simulated in which somehow the things that you provoked or created via tape technique happen, but in a simulated way. They don't seem to really happen. Do you see, like, in the physical process, which is for sure different because it's a simulation, do you see also that this changes the quality of what it does in the environment, and following up on this, obviously nobody of us or many of us don't have the access to either a cistern, a swimming pool, or a studio full of tube oscillators, which obviously are places that allow us to have this experience. Therefore, one goes to the accessibility of programs that are available for everyone. So I just wanted to listen to some reflection on this point.
Yes, of course. Well, yes, it is pretty much different. I think that, I mean, for example, I mean, the commercial instruments that are available now, they may be shortchanged in terms of frequency response. A simulation may take shortcuts so that the simulation does not resemble completely the analog version. You know, so I mean, it's getting better. I think things are getting better in terms of that, in terms of technology, computers, and programmers. You know, who are listening more. I've taught probably 300 or more engineers by now in my deep listening class at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And I think some of them have been quite changed by participating and learning and actually improvising, composing, and performing. By the end of the semester, all the students have produced 2 recordings that they have mixed and edited and make a piece, maybe a 3-minute piece like that. So, some of them have never had any experience at all in that respect. So it's really, again, it just comes down to how are you listening, you know, and what are you listening for in your work? Are the tools that you have adequate to express what you want to express? This is important, I think. And so you have to choose carefully, I think, because now your choices are so enormous, actually, especially if you're cruising around on the internet and if you're talking to people from all over the world, as you are here, which I think is absolutely fabulous. And also, I just want to comment that I'm very impressed with the Red Bull Academy and how they've created this special place for you to be and to work and to interact with one another. And that the interaction that you have with each other is probably the most important of all. Just as my interaction with Terry Riley and Malloran Rush and Stuart Dempster in 1954, they're lifelong friends. I'm still in touch with them. We do things sometimes. And Stuart and I were, in the deep listening band, all of about 25 years. So people that you meet here are going to be with you in a variety of ways, you know, as you go along. And that interaction, as I say, is a blessing and is most important.
Thank you very much.
I have a question over here. On the left, your left. Yeah. Hi. I just wanted to ask about during deep listening meditation, we were encouraged to have an inclusive listening to the inside, to the outside, to what's happening, in far places, different dimensions. So, I mean, do you think it's possible to express that? I mean, when you transition into making music, so that's obvious that somehow reduces that listening to a melodic line, or to there's certain constraints within that listening which are not in the inclusive listening that we experienced in meditation. So is there a way to reconcile this, or do you think it's possible to express that feeling of deep listening, inclusive listening through music at all, or through sound? And is that what you're striving for, or is that music
good.
that you particularly enjoy listening to? That something that has attempts to do that, or
Okay. For me, I mean, if I'm sitting down to perform, I'm listening, and I'm listening for everything. I'm trying to open to the whole field of whatever it is that I'm involved with at the time. That's why people came up to me and wanted to know how I could get the fire engines to go by on time. Okay, so if you're in a studio, my work in analog came out of working in an analog studio, but the important part was how I was listening to the studio instruments that were there, and how I adapted them to my intentions, my purpose. But that was the purpose, and the intention came through the listening that I was doing. And so that's always kind of primary with me, you know. I'm not saying I got to do this or that or the other, and I got to make this plan and follow it. As I said, in our improvisations, following a plan always failed because we couldn't quite do it. So it was better not to plan, because then anything goes if you are listening. So that's my answer to you. I don't know if it answers what you wanted.
Yeah, It does. I've just a slight addition to that. Personally, through my own practice, I found that gesture is a more immediate response to a listening practice rather than making. So the sound is the next phase because first you do the gesture and then the sound comes afterwards. So do you find there's a lot of do you work on the body at all, like as a kind of a movement? Movement is an important part of it, and
Yeah, very important.
yeah.
Listening through the body, and sort of formalistic practices like Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga, for example, are good practices to keep you going. But also creative movement is important, so that you can move freely and find out things about your body through spontaneity, the spontaneity of gesture or movement. I think that's really important, and it's part of the practice. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, Pauline. Over here. 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 Hello, thank you so much for the lecture and the concert yesterday and all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe my question is obvious, but I would like to hear your thoughts on why is it important, deep listening? Why it's important?
Okay. Well, it might not be important at all. I don't know. Well, after all, it started from a pun, right?
Puns are important too.
Well, what is happening, of course, is that we have produced about at least 50, maybe more, deep listening certificate holders, we call them, who have gone through our program and are now qualified to teach workshops. And we're producing quite a few more through our online course, Deep Listening Certification, which is run by Tomie Han, who is the director of the Center for Deep Listening at Rensselaer. So the program is open and available. There's a new one starting in January. It's a one-year course, and it meets on Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time once a month with instructors. And for the first time in 2017, the instructors are all going to be deep listening certificate holders who have come along with us. And Ione and Eloise and myself will visit the class, to give input once or twice, whatever. So we're beginning to send it out to the certificate holders to carry it on. And they are doing this because all of them, or not all of them, but many of them are doing workshops in different parts of the world now. So they're carrying deep listening forward. So there's a lot of inquiry and a lot of recognition that it seems to be helping in some ways, and I hope in a lot of ways. Excuse me.
Thanks again for everything and for your wonderful lecture. My question relates to engineering, and you spoke earlier that you've taught 300 engineers, that you have programmers who help you with your system that you use to perform, and that also in your career you have been doing this for decades. I know with the EAT Lab, these were collaborations also with engineers, and I was wondering that right now, when there are so many tools available which are produced mainly by engineers and that are quite integral to new practices and artistic practices, how would you describe your interaction with engineers? Is it prescriptive? Do you know exactly what you want from them, or is it more collaborative, where ideas for interaction with your expanded system and for performance come about through understanding the criteria and objectives of the engineer?
Okay. So in my deep listening class, everybody participates in, first of all, we do what I call energy exercises. Energy exercises go through the whole body and activate lymph flow, blood flow, and electrical flow, so that you begin to understand that you have nerve endings in the palms of your hands, which you can actually feel electrical impulses. And when you feel that, then you can begin to do things with that. So there's that. Also, you have nerve endings in the soles of your feet, so that if you can sense what I call the three different energies, which is heat. You can feel the heat or in your feet. My feet might be cold. We have that expression, I got cold feet, for something. And you can feel the pull of gravity, and you can feel what else? I forgot. Heat and electricity. So you have the nerve endings in the soles of your feet. So these energy exercises help people to recognize these different kinds of signals in the body. And so this happens through, a weekly practice of coming and doing these exercises. Some of the engineers begin to use that and do these exercises. And I recommend it for people who sit in front of a computer all day, to get up and do what I call arm swinging, swinging your arms forward and back, which releases tension under the arms. And a lot of us are just not aware how much tension we hold under our arms. So this is part of what I teach, and that's one aspect. The next is doing listening meditation, like we've done, and I have different focuses that I give for the listening meditation. And then after the listening meditation, there is a period of journaling. So the students write down their experience of the exercises. And then there's a break. And after the break, this is a 4-hour seminar. That takes care of the first 2 hours. Then the second 2 hours is always some kind of a workshop where you... for instance, I ask people to bring a found object to class that they can make sound with, and find something that they can make all kinds of sounds with, and that they can be heard across the room. And then when they bring their found objects, we listen to each person's object, but then I get them into small groups of, say, 4 or 5 people, and they work together for some 15 minutes or so. Then we have everybody demonstrate their or do an improvisation with their found sounds. Yeah. And then the next project then is probably to record found sounds and make a piece with that. So it keeps going like that, until finally by the end of the semester they've produced 2 recordings of pieces, and they've done improvisation, they've done composing with like found object, and recorded pieces. So they get a lot of experience by of listening in different ways, Okay, so that's how I work with the engineers. Now, there's listening assignments every week. They read a book called Audio Culture, which has a lot of really good information from different composers and practitioners of various kinds. But there's a nice discography and bibliography, so that each student is asked to listen to 3 pieces, and then to write 3 sentences about each piece, a 3-sentence review. By the end of the semester, these students write a final paper based on their journal and based on things that they've listened to, whatever. They can choose their own subject. Now, engineers often ask me, well, why do we have to listen to the noise pieces? And so then I have a lot of fun. I say, why don't you guys go into your machine shop and make a recording? And then I say, what about the sound of New York City? Do you know who composed that? And I say, you guys. You guys, you engineers, you're the ones that have risen the noise level in New York City and other places so high. So I said, so why don't you do some deep listening?
Thank you.
Hello. Hi. Thank you. So I have a question about spirituality. I've always about spirituality.
Oh, okay.
I've always kind of had part of myself. I've had like intuition or kind of an inclination towards a spiritual path. I'm also a musician, and as like the deeper I got into making music, I tried to understand the relationship between music and spirituality for myself, and it became a little more clear when I started doing a lot more drone-oriented music and just doing like tonal listening, just a lot of just long tones, a lot of just slow changing filters, things like that. And I'm wondering with you, if you had an experience like that through your practice as you got more into your music, did you form a like spiritual path or a relationship with your music, and how important is that to you?
Well, for me, listening is a spiritual path, because the more you listen, the more you learn, and the more you're able to put yourself in someone else's position, which is part of spirituality, that it's not just about you. Thank you.
I would like to say that it was a pleasure to listen to and listen with you, Pauline Oliveros. Thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you, Hannah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh. Okay, so we should stand up too. All right, thank you. Oh, Thank you, thank you, thank you.